At the start of 2018, I was near death. I had dealt with death many times before 2018, therefore I should clarify. I saw death for the first time at 1 month old. My parents introduced me to my grandparents as a newborn. Car collision. Remember how unsafe automobiles and kids were in the 1980s? I flew inside the car. My parents found me crying and upset by the incident, which did not hurt anyone. My parents told me about the accident, but I was too young to remember. Whether related to the car accident or not, I feared death for years. I always worried about returning after death. I was afraid of dying but didn't know why. Later, at age 10, I underwent 2 emergency surgeries. They were hard, but I survived. I wondered why I was having that so early. A few years later, at 17, I had another vehicle accident. I was a passenger when the driver lost control and crashed. As the front seat passenger, I seemed to have taken up the full impact. Before blacking out, I thought, that's it, I'm dead. There's no way I can survive that. I woke up near the road a few minutes later. I saw a smashed car and blue sky behind me. I was curious what occurred. We had a vehicle accident. Reviewing past events, seeing images of the car and its condition a few weeks later stunned me even more. It was completely flattened where I sat. How could I have survived with so few wounds? After seeing the photographs, I should have died. If not, the accident would have devastated me. When I was 17, I was about 6'2" or 6'3". I had a conversation with my grandmother between 18 and 20. I got along well with my grandparents and family, but I especially liked both of my grandmothers. We could have long, meaningful conversations about life or anything. I remember saying, I really wonder why, with me meeting death so many times. Why have I been hit by death 4 times? Each time it could have been severe, but here I am. And if I walk down the street, no one would know. A few scars apart, I can do anything. So it's unusual for me, and I feel like death is hunting me, she answered with a smile that has stayed with me. I was surprised when she replied, what must I do? I'd respond, well, I would love to go and live in an English-speaking nation. She said, well, just pursue that. Something will happen to take you to an English-speaking country. Grab opportunities when they arrive. Because otherwise, yes, you would have died a long time ago if you did not have something special to do. Life continues. I attend college, begin working, and soon, as she mentioned, I will be able to travel to a nation where the language is spoken. Is there a better country than the UK? Professionally, I relished it, because living in a country requires one to comprehend its language, customs, habits, and culture. I could improve my English and grow in my career. In the nation, things will be simpler for you. Up till January 2018, everything works out professionally. On paper, I had nothing to be unhappy about. Life, I'm married to my true love, have a fantastic career that pays well, live in a lovely English home, and drive a fancy automobile. All appears well on paper. I detest my job, though. There are a lot of restructurings, I'm under a lot of strain, and I'm unhappy doing the work of 3 people. It's emotionally taxing me. I am also thinking about going into osteopathy. I've begun my training. I've studied osteopathic medicine for years and hold credentials in massage therapy. My life is incredibly busy because I work during the day, study in the evenings, and travel on weekends to complete some of my coursework in person. I was thinking, that's too much. That many things are too much for me. Like I'm spinning too many plates. My wife and I were having that same conversation at a restaurant 2 days before the near-death experience. My stomach's right side hurts like a blade piercing flesh. It happened all of a sudden and feels powerful, sharp, and terrible. After supper, we go home, but this feeling doesn't go away. I can't sleep, and it's getting stronger and more spastic. Sweeting keeps me up at night. You may have food poisoning. Extreme food poisoning. We contact 999 in the UK in the morning, and they say, well, you need to get to the hospital to be checked. This time, it's different. She gives me medicine, which helps, and I get better right away. I guess maybe she's right. Maybe that was all it was, and my system wasn't adjusted to it. But she adds, call us back, and we'll give you advice if the issue doesn't get better or worse. We return home too tired to walk all day on Friday. Sunday morning, we phone 911 again and get an ambulance. A paramedic finds me on the living room sofa and asks, "What's up?" Of course, and it feels like I'm telling the same story 3 times in 3 days. He makes notes. I remember the terrible feeling of the IV fluid streaming down my veins, but he nods and gives me an IV with a painkiller because you genuinely are in physical agony. We need to stabilize you on that front, but that doesn't immediately relieve the pain. I take a few deep breaths with the mask he gives me and feel like I've entered a different universe. He tells me to feel better and fly through the blackness with nothing around me. It's nice and feels like a getaway. I don't feel anything, but I'm not conscious of it. I eventually spot a dim light off in the distance. The moment I look at that tiny spark of light, it either gets bigger or I accelerate toward it. I'm not sure which is which. As I get closer, I notice that big orb or circle of light. I'm overjoyed to have seen them after such a long time. I feel happy energy from the other side. But then I realize I know them even though I can't see them. And I realize this is normal. I use French and English to convey my point. No way, désolé, meaning not now, to those things in the light. I can feel the other side's non-resentment, which is more like, okay, well, that's what you want, that's okay. So I say, no, thank you. I don't want that to happen. And then I'm taken back down a tunnel, and my body is reassembled. My wife is now appearing scared and patting my shoulder while I'm sitting on the couch. I appear dumbfounded when she asks, "Are you okay?" Because I'm wondering, why am I here again? And I see the paramedic taking notes behind me. My wife asks me again, "Are you sure? Are you okay?" I say, "Yes, I am," and turn to face the floor before picking up the mask that fell there. I think I had a vivid hallucination. So I'm pretty sure if I breathe the gases again, I'll have another hallucination, but nothing happens. My wife doesn't understand what I'm saying. Later, the soreness reappears and my body hurts 10/10. I realized then that I was floating in that pitch-black abyss on the other side, pain-free. Turning, the paramedic replies, "It's bad. We have to rush you to the hospital. You're in pretty serious condition." I think I've made a mistake, so I try again to breathe the medical gases to send myself back to the other side, but nothing happens. I forget about the NDE and so on because I'm rushed to the hospital quickly. They claim that one of your 10-year-old procedures is the cause. How on earth is this possible 23 years later? I'm in shock. They said, nevertheless, that I was still carrying a ticking time bomb from the previous surgery and had not fully healed. It could have gone off 20 years ago, 20 years later, or it could go off right now. Even though it didn't explode, you still need to handle the current scenario. They advised me to attempt non-invasive treatments first, as we could need to have a significant procedure to solve the issue. I have no choice but to get surgery. I was telling myself, deep down, I know that I've decided to come back to this life even though I don't remember specifically why or how. I felt many peaceful presences telling me to stay calm and that everything would be fine. At that point, I had forgotten about the NDE, but I remember being quite confident that I would sail through that episode in my life. I saw a fantastic surgeon, and we talked about our alternatives for surgery. After the procedure, he informed me that he had done the absolute minimum and that given our prior discussions and the fact that I was young and in good health, he would have done more if I had been an older patient. It took 18 months to recover to 100% capacity, and the first 6 months were 70 to 80%. I was really relieved to survive, and they said, "I'm pretty certain you will recover with the bare minimum. However, we cannot rule out any risk of that reoccurrence if you like. 10% more after another 6 months. The previous 6 times, I was too heavy to draw the curtains or open the drapes." My recuperation went well and quickly. However, I continued to fear death because I knew it would recur. I changed employment and opted to end my year of osteopathy studies without continuing because every time I experienced pain, I thought, well, maybe that's going to happen again. Painful physically and mentally, I don't want to go through that again. My choice was to relocate to a better area and take stock of my life. The fact that I made myself value life more was exciting. Prior to then, I was too focused on my career to truly enjoy life. I'm currently forcing myself to value life and the healing process, despite the fact that it's not always enjoyable. 2018 was a great year, in my opinion. It wasn't a good start, but after what happened, I felt hopeful. Even though I was still terrified of dying, my mother unexpectedly shared an article about NDs with me. I have no idea why that piqued her curiosity. One evening, I started reading the article about this French doctor who was fascinated by NDs and wanted to learn more about them. He developed a technique with a hypnotherapist that allowed individuals to experience an NDE-like condition without any physical restrictions or emergencies. Having a near-death experience should not be advised, as it may be a sign of a serious health problem. To put it plainly, don't try. The author of the piece told me how he experienced the hypnosis session, felt like he was flying in a pitch-black emptiness, saw entities in the light, met them, and was transported to other locations and the hereafter. I couldn't quite place the memory, but it felt like I had actually experienced that. I cannot recall the time or location, but if I experienced such a meeting, I would never forget it. The memory came back. I thought back to that morning when I was lying on the sofa, breathing in medical gases, and being taken to the hospital. However, I was unsure if it was real or just a delusion. You were touching my shoulder and seemed scared, so I asked my wife, "Hey, do you remember anything specific happening on that Sunday morning before I was rushed to the hospital?" Said, "How?" I lowered the mask, was unconscious but cognizant, and had wide eyes, she said, pausing and growing pale. "Well, I've never really wanted to tell it to you, but I thought you were dead. I walked by your side, ready to scream. I yelled your name and stroked your shoulder, but you didn't respond. After 2 to 3 seconds, you regained consciousness, looking perplexed. I said, your body was lifeless. It's quite specific. You asked me, where am I? She asked, and I answered, well, I'm just glad you're back here, basically. I then told her about my near-death experience. Even though it seemed to take longer than 5 minutes to me, it was really just 2 or 3 seconds to her. Therefore, the fact that our perception of time varies based on our location was, in my opinion, a wonderful acceptance and affirmation that what had happened had not been a delusion. She was actually present. She served as my eyewitness to the fact that it had truly happened. The events at that time also relieved a great burden from my shoulders. The fear of dying had vanished in an instant, and that was such a relief in and of itself. It was like I was just giving death a big hug and saying, hey, thank you for showing me that actually there was nothing to fear. It's just a transition because now I know for sure, and I've lived it and experienced it, that my consciousness is going to continue after my life as we know it ends. And even though I'm not sure who they are, I know that there is a realm of sorts waiting for me on the other side, where I will eventually reunite. But even just those things seemed so tranquil, like I was completely at peace with death. I used to simply be in such panic over it, but now I'm just like, well, if I die tomorrow, so be it, I'm at peace with it. I would fight it. I would fight it with everything I had. However, I also felt that a deeper comprehension of death improved my grasp of life. It also made me realize how crucial it is to live life to the fullest while yet being true to who you are. It's as simple as that. Taking away the aspect of dying with fear made me live life to the fullest. Live life to the fullest because I'm not always thinking, oh, this or that, just go and live your life. Even though the NDE itself was brief, the story fundamentally altered my understanding of death and thus my understanding of life. I simply want that everyone may have that one moment when they are fully free of fear of dying, even if I think that fear of death is incredibly personal, distinct, and individual to each person. However, I'm very sure that if society as a whole changed its entire perspective on mortality, we could make significant changes to the way we function as a unit, how we treat one another as individuals, and many other aspects of our daily lives. And the great what if? I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for listening. I'm exploring that what if idea in the novel as a fiction because it's easier to communicate and has some fictitious elements, giving you more options.